Good morning. Welcome to the Discourses of Decolonization in Africa. What do we mean when we say decolonization in Africa? This is what actually the majority of Africans should be surround themselves with, should familiarize themselves with in the 21st century. Why? Because the Astral colonizer, when they granted us the juridical independence, they never left Africa, but rather what did they do? They only gave us the flag independence, and they only gave us the juridical independence and kept the economic means of doing business. They kept the economic levers in their hands. What does that entail to Africa? It means that the Astral colonizer will never want Africa to develop from where she is today to another level. Why? Because a development for Africa, it means a paradigm shift in the global way of doing things. And the Westerners and the hegemonic West are not ready for that. The Astral colonizers are not ready for that change. Thus, an inspiration and encouragement to Africans to actually put forward issues of decolonization. Discourses of decolonization must be at the center stage in each and every university in Africa. Each and every university in Africa must see to it that instead of supporting and enhancing the Western concept of education, we actually strive to put our own African institutions, our own African institutions in our tertiary. Decolonization of Africa is one of the flawed arguments in the 21st century, in the sense that as Africans we have been misled for quite some time. If we are to look back at the books we have been studying since our elementary, primary and secondary levels of education, these books were drafted by the Astral colonizer, and they were drafted in the manner that supports or that actually depicts a negative picture against the African. It depicts a picture, it taints everything about an African. The Astral colonizer has got a tendency of irony in naming this continent. At first, they name it the dark continent, they name it the underdeveloped continent, they name it the global south. So they have all sorts of naming they actually give to this continent, regardless of how the continent is actually rich in terms of resources. These are actually the facts. The Westerners won't tell you that the continent of Africa has got the potential to actually develop to more than the level they are there in the Westerners. And for the Westerners specifically, America, Europe, and the NATO and all its alliances, they are what they are today because of Africa. All they are today is because of Africa, since the slave trade coming to the industrialization stages up to today. Right now, the world is undergoing the fourth and fifth industrial revolution, which is the Internet of Things, which depicts that everything is going digital. And the most iron of it for the continent of Africa is the key ingredients and the key resources for this fifth industrial revolution are coming from Africa. There is cobalt, there is lithium. These two resources, cobalt found in DRC. Alright, so the Westerners are actually on a mission of milking Africa of its resources to the core. Without Africa, without lithium, without cobalt, without DRC, without Zimbabwe and other rich African states, clearly there won't be any fifth industrial revolution. There won't be any development. There won't be any industrial development in the world. Why? For the mere reason that Africa is the center stage for the global development. Africa has always been the center stage for the global development for time without number. Decolonization in Africa in the 21st century, it means that we need to decolonize our economic means of doing production, our political means of governing our states, our social means of conducting business in Africa. We need to actually tackle decolonization as a whole. We need to completely detach ourselves as Africans from that which actually marries us to the as to a colonizer. Our educational systems in Africa are structured in a manner that only creates tools. We only create graduate tools. We are channeled to become tools so that we can actually enhance the neo-colonial project for us to a colonizer. Take it like this. Our educational systems are structured in what we call the bottleneck educational system, such that at the base here, we are so many when we are from the primary and secondary education, and by the time we reach the tertiary educational level, we have actually been shrinked. We have actually been reduced in number, such that because the system on its own, it creates classes, it creates divisions, because the system on its own actually creates division up to the point where we reach the tertiary level. We now have a few Africans, we now have a few individuals. So what does that mean to those ones who fail the ordinary level? It means now these are the source of labor. It means these are the source of actually much of the labor that in the industries. And what of those who manage to reach the tertiary education? Now it's either they're economists, they're accountants, they're marketers. So already they have been channeled. They've been channeled to be tools to enhance the neo-colonial project, which is actually in support of the capitalist system of the Westerners. The capitalistic system is at the core of the failures and is at the core of underdeveloping Africa and all the global South regions, including the Latin America. The system on its own, it does not need a rocket scientist to come from any planet to come and show us how the capitalistic system has failed for over 2.5 decades. The capitalistic system of the conceptual West has done nothing but only continue to underdevelop and continue to dehumanize the African continent. The dehumanization of the African continent by the conceptual West is a cause of concern for this continent, especially for our contemporary leaders in the 21st century. Look at how the international system is actually being used, instrumentalized to actually implement the international political decisions without them looking political at all. This is all being purported by the hegemonic West, led by the US and its allies, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which some actually call in a joking manner the no action but talk only guys, the NATO. These guys are at the core of actually underdeveloping Africa and milking Africa of its resources to the core at the expense of their selfish interests, selfish personal gains. Without Africa, there won't be Fifth Industrial Revolution. Without Africa, as I already alluded to, there won't be robots, there won't be 5G network. Africa is at the core of development, and yet in reality, Africa is at the periphery of the peripherals. The ICC, the International Criminal Court, being one of the global institutions which was enacted to foster global peace and security, it's actually proving to be a failure in that. This organization, this institution, with the contemporary development, is only proving. Professor Tim Murithi can actually second me on these claims. This institution is proving in the 21st century to be an institution which was only erected to only try African leaders, to only try African heads of states. It's being used as a neo-colonial project, in the sense that it's being instrumentalized to make political decisions look legal at all. Yet they are actually political decisions. We talk of the Rome Statute, which is the founding treaty to the ICC. The Rome Statute is the founding treaty to the international law, which the Americans themselves, they are not a signatory to it. Not only are they not a signatory to it, they were actually, the irony of it is always alluding to that America is and its allies are good at being ironic to the world. They first signed this this Rome Statute, soon enough they relapsed out of it. Not only did they relapse, they went further after leaving the Rome Statute and actually enacted what's called the bilateral immunity agreements, and they forced the majority of the countries in the world to sign this, which was actually known as the Hague Invasion Act. Like Invasion Act, the Hague Invasion Act was on its own an act which was meant to actually raise a middle finger against the Rome Statute. America was just flexing its muscles to say that now we are actually the unipolar, we are actually the global leader. We can do what we want, and we can as well have the powers actually to try each and everyone in this world without us being the signatory to this statute. Look, by the powers they are vested in themselves through the Security Council, the United Nations Security Council, the permanent five one. This is one of the reasons why Africa needs to decolonize in the 21st century. The permanent 5 members of the UN Security Council are nothing but just an extension of the neo-colonial project. They are actually misusing the power they gave to themselves to continue milking and belittling the less developed countries. The Permanent Security Council members, they actually invoke. There is no doubt whatsoever, there is no doubt beyond any reasonable doubt that for the world, for the current world to thrive towards sustainable peace and development, the UN Security Permanent 5 members need to be dismantled. They need to be dismantled, and a new system needs to emerge. That system which is going to see an inclusion of each and everyone in the world equally, without states being actually looking down upon each other. Another reason why the continent of Africa needs to decolonize, especially in this contemporary times, there is a global rush for Africa. The whole of the global village is coming to Africa to hunt. Don't never think that they are coming to Africa for the fun of it or for amusement. They are coming to Africa to hunt. You look at right now, there is now the emergence of the Arabs in Africa, the Indians, the UAE, the Asians, the Indians, the Arabs. These are all emerging groups in Africa, and they are coming to Africa for its resources, nothing else. They are coming to Africa for its resources, which they realize that for quite some time, it has always been the Westerners which has been in the business of milking this continent. And now, what are we that we can't go and join the milking of the continent? After all, the continent has always been milked for quite some time, so we can't really blame them for joining the race of milking Africa, but rather it's actually a wake-up call for our leaders to realize that which our forefathers like Kwame Nkrumah said in the year 1963, that we must leave Addis Ababa right now in Ethiopia with one African currency, with one African government, with one African identity, if we are actually to secure ourselves from the subjugation of the imperialists. Because the imperialists, we must acknowledge, from the words of Nkwame himself, we must acknowledge that the imperialists did not leave Africa because they wanted. We actually forced themselves out. So for that mere reason, they will always come back. They will always come back, and we should actually prepare ourselves to be ready for that when they come back. And prominent scholars on imperialism, they'll tell you that neo-colonialism is actually the highest stage of imperialism and the most threatening stage of imperialism. And for that reason, we should be threatened as Africa at how the imperialist is actually coming to Africa in the 21st century in pursuit of our resources. Our resources are at the key of the appetite of the imperialists in our country. And for this mere reason, we should totally cut
of the umbilical cord that keeps us married to our colonizer. Education is one of the key drivers of the imperialistic tendencies. There's a sense in which in Africa we need to decolonize our educational systems so that we start teaching that which is African. Clearly, I find no sense in teaching our children the mosquito life cycle while he's growing up, so that they grow up knowing that there's a mosquito that causes malaria, instead of teaching them how the importance of, and the usages and how can you actually differentiate diamonds from mere stones, how can you differentiate lithium from mere stones, how can you differentiate cobalt from just mere sedimentary rocks. There is a sense in which we need to teach ourselves that which actually improves them, that which actually sustains them, like entrepreneurship, not actually this contemporary Western system of education, which actually is a neo-colonial project. Apart from education, look at how religion has played a part in actually polarizing Africans, in actually diverging Africans. It keeps on creating a gap between Africans which continue to widen up and poses a greater threat for our future as Africans. Religion is at the core of unity of people. And the Westerners, when they came here to Africa, they found us in peace with our religion, with our African traditional religion, and they saw actually that actually it was at the core of our unity as a continent. And what did they do? They actually connived to actually overthrow our religion, our beliefs, and then replaced with their own. Christianity, believe you in me, Christianity, especially in the 21st century, is being faced with so many adversaries. Is being faced with so many adversaries and so many negativities, just like how democracy is. Christianity and democracy, these are the two concepts that are intertwined, and these are the two concepts that in reality Africa do not need. In reality, Africa just does not need democracy. Rather, what it needs is actually a social democracy, a democracy that is defined according to its cultural roots, that is deeply embedded in Africa's cultural roots. We need to redefine the democratic principles, which is actually Western, and we need to decongest, so actually to decolonize that, so that we actually uphold that which is African. Just like how Samora Moises Machel, Robert Gabriel Mugabe, Ngugi Wationg, and Amika Cabral, all these are vibrant African politicians and academics. They have always been purporting for the social democracy in Africa. And what happened to them? Look at the tragic death of Samora Moises Machel, how he died due to the Western hand. So it's actually their way of doing things. Anyone who tries to raise his head and put his energy towards the unification of the continent, they are quickly to chop that person down. Look at what happened to Colonel Gaddafi in Libya. Until the death of Colonel Gaddafi, Libya never knew peace. And what was he trying to drive Africa at? Was the unification of the continent, the one currency for the continent, the one identity for the continent, dismantling of the artificial borders that were imposed upon us. This is what they do to any African leader who tries actually to decolonize the continent and cut off the umbilical cord that actually keeps us intact with our astral colonizer. They are quick to label that person an iron fist leader, a tyrant leader, just like how they labeled Mugabe. So there is a sense in which we need to decolonize our political system such that we adopt that which is African and actually see our continent being actually helped from the shackles of these demonic systems of the Westerners. Religion, Christianity, as I already alluded to, Christianity is actually being used in. It has always been used, and it's still being used, especially in the contemporary terms, to pervert the truth. being perverted with Christianity. Christianity has always been used to keep Africa underdeveloped and to keep Africa under the yoke of the astral colonizer. How is it that the same Bible that they are using right now is the very same Bible they were using when they colonized us? How is it that this very same Bible actually they are using right now teaches us that when you are slapped on your right cheek, you really give the other cheek to be slapped? I find no logic in that. That blessed are the poor on earth. Honestly, who even told? Maybe we are already in heaven. Who knows? So is it that who created God indeed? Is it God created humanity, or the humanity created the idea of God? So as Africans, we need to question these actually fundamentals, and if we get to question these fundamentals, it will actually help us realize our true identity. Our true identity, such that, because back then we were actually closer to God Himself. We would pray under the moacha tree and food would appear, we would eat and then leave the food there and go. Wasn't that manna from heaven? But no, what did they do? The colonizer, the missionaries came with the Bible and said, no, during the days of the Israelites, they moved through the desert and then there was manna from heaven. Isn't it probably? So, the notion of manna from heaven in the Bible, there is a sense in which that notion was actually copied. It's actually a copied concept from the African traditional religion. Why? Because back then our leaders could pray under the moacha tree and then food would reappear and then they'll eat and then leave it there. Food for thought. It's actually a story for another day. But the key takeaways from this is religion has always been at the core of colonizing the continent, and now it's at the core of actually polarizing the continent and keeping it underdeveloped. Thus, as Africans, we have a duty to review Christianity as a religion, to actually reveal it without being emotional, without being parochial, and with us being actually broad-minded. We need to be open-minded and actually realistic in approach. We need not to mince any words, just like how they mean globalization, how they depict it as something precious to Africa. Yet we know that in actual terms, globalization means the neo-colonial stage. Having exposed how the conceptual West, through America and its hegemonic dominance with the alliance, the NATO, the incompetencies of the ICC, how actually knowledge, the production of knowledge in Africa is being used to actually mislead Africans for quite some time, and also the issues of religion in Africa, how religion is being used to pervert the truth, how religion is being used to mislead a lot of, and to polarize actually the region of Africa. It also brings to notion, or it also brings to this presentation, the issues to do with actually the media, the issues to do with language and media. Language in the sense that we need actually to decolonize the issues, the aspects of knowledge. How is it that in the 21st century we still actually classify ourselves as the Anglophones, the Lusophones, and then the Francophones? By doing that, we are not embracing that which is African, because language is at the key of the unification of people, and is at the key. Language defines our roots. Linguistic abilities defines where we come from. So as Africa, we need to actually divorce ourselves from the issues of speaking French, of the issues of speaking. We should find one or two common languages for Africa. How is it our tertiary institutions teach actually French, Portuguese, but no African language at all? Why is it that we don't teach? How is it that we failing to actually teach? What do you call it? This language, Swahili. Africans should actually find one or two languages, like Swahili, for instance. We should find a common language so that to unify our teaching strategies across the continent. Until we actually do away with the foreign languages in our continent, that's when actually we begin to see some sustainable changes toward the decolonization of the continent. And the issues to do with media, especially in the 21st century. Right now, 99.99% of that which Africa is consuming via media is alien. It's actually foreign. It's actually misleading to an African. The Westerners have been in the business of misleading the Africans through the media, because they say tell a vision, a story. They are telling their vision and their stories, which actually depicts this superiority about whites, and also at the expense of undermining and actually humanizing us as Africans. BBC, CNN, all these Hollywood and other Western media houses, they are only tools and instruments of the neo-colonial project, just like how the IMF, the World Bank, the World Health Organization, the ICC, the World Trade Organization are just instruments of the neo-colonial project, and they are serving no purpose to Africa's development, but only continue to the milking and underdeveloping of Africa, so which Africa in the 21st century needs to do away with it completely and totally, and embrace through the African Union and its organs, embrace the African that's actually in our motherland, and adopt those policies, only the policies that actually that are deeply rooted in Pan-African spirit, and those policies which are actually selfish in defending the Afrocentric interest. We need to totally do away with the Westerners and do away with the look east nor west policy, so that we look upon ourselves, we look held upon ourselves. The Africa Agenda 2063 is one of the blueprints which Africa needs at the moment, and we should harness and promote the development and the realization of that agenda if Africa is to free itself from the shackles of its neo-colonial, colonizer, which is actually active in Africa and is actually more active than before. Why? Because the neo-colonialism is the highest and most threatening stage of imperialism. So we should be threatened. We should actually do this as Africans, as I'll quote this cliche by Professor Lumumba before I wrap this up. We should actually do this as Africans, because if we don't do it, we are done as a continent. Thank you for watching. Stay blessed.